Hey everyone, welcome back to Underreported Stories, where I cover the news that CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News fail to report on or don't report on enough. And today, we have such good stories and such good post stories too. Like, if you are a real story seeker, you love Underreported, you are going to love today's show, okay? More than you usually do, okay? Also, you guys have probably heard me at least say the term story seeker a couple of times on this channel and on the podcast. And Story Seekers is a members only channel on my Instagram. It's completely free. I know members only sounds like, ooh, you got to pay for it. No, completely free. And it's a place where I'm just going to ask you questions about what you're interested in me talking about on the podcast. It's really just the best way for us to communicate. So you can join on Instagram when you go to my page at the Chrissy Clark. It is linked below. And speaking of story seekers, Jonathan in our Story Seekers community wanted me to answer a question in our little pre-5 Underreported Stories banter. And the question was how to reach the emotional voter. And I saw this question. I was like, damn, what a great way, Jonathan, to start today's show by diving into such a hot topic that I don't think my audience will like the answer to. But either way, I'm going to answer this question. So thank you, Jonathan, for this. My thoughts here. Let me start by how not to reach the emotional voter. And let's be honest, when we're talking about the emotional voter, yes, we might be talking about a handful of men. Don't get me wrong, I definitely see that they exist. But 9 times out of 10, I think we're talking about women, right? Like, it's the women that are very emotional voters. And I think it's, the people asking these questions, typically, like Jonathan, are men wondering how to convince women to see their point of view. Because oftentimes, you're right. Like, I'm a woman and I see the truth here. But a lot of the times, emotions will get in the way of that. So let me start by just painting the picture for you. So the demographics, they tell us that 63% of women who are voting for Democrats are unmarried. And I'm sure a lot of you guys are blessed and older and married, but let me just describe the culture for you right now. The culture around dating, specifically to women, and you can disagree, but this is how I see it. Online, the culture is you hit 30, you're fugly, you're worthless, you're only hot in your 20s, and also don't complain that no man in their 20s wants to settle down with you. Deal with it. But if no man wants to settle down with you in your 20s and you're 30, doesn't matter. It's still your fault. You're fugly and you're probably a slut or something. Like, that is all the online discourse I see about this topic. And then you couple that with a couple of one-off jokes or poorly tasted jokes about being a sad cat lady. And it all just kind of culminates in women being told it's their fault, okay? It's your fault you're a sad cat lady because the dating scene is awful. And there is some, you have to take accountability for some of it as women. If you're not prioritizing dating in your 20s, please don't be confused when you're in your 30s and you're not married or you're not dating seriously, right? Or you don't have kids or you don't have a family. That's on you. But if you are genuinely and earnestly trying to date in your 20s, I do think that there's an untalked about culture about this epidemic of a lack of intelligent and kind men. There are just men that go out there, they get belligerent drunk every weekend. And I just keep hearing this online discourse like, women are just hoes too, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, maybe it's at least in my own life, I can think of 10 beautiful, God-seeking women in their late 20s who couldn't get arrested to catch a man who is of their true value. Like, they are wonderful and beautiful, and the men that they find are like ugly and awful to them. And I wouldn't find, I can't find somebody for them. I wouldn't find one singular person I would set them up with, because the ratio of awesome women to awesome men, at least where I live, is whack as fuck. So tee all of that up with there are great women. There are even great Republican women out there that are single, that just have the hardest time in this dating scene. And then a culture that says it's your fault for being 30 and single and barren. Okay, tee all of that up to women, the emotional voter, and just know that they're not going to respond well when you kind of are combative with them, okay? Because the truth is the emotional voter, the woman, responds to kindness. We are receptive to truth through kindness. And the culture is really not kind to women. And you don't have to like my answer, but that is my answer. And I saw this really bear out a couple of weeks ago. I went on this podcast called Whatever. There are clips of the show on my YouTube channel. You can go and watch them. But at one point, we got to the topic of abortion. And the way the show is set up, the premise of the show is like the host who's like 35 and single, and usually somebody that's going to debate alongside him, and then a couple of conservatives, and then a couple of like potential like OnlyFans models or like, I don't even know, crazy people. And on the panel I was on, there was a singer-songwriter. Her name was Riley, and she identified as Catholic with pro-choice views. Now, I know what you think. And I saw what was happening there. Andrew and the host, the men on the panel, were sitting there and they were barraging her, wondering, how can you hold the view that you are Catholic and pro-choice? It doesn't make any sense. And they just started attacking. And nothing was getting through to her. Like, they thought they were like roasting her and winning, and like, that's totally fine. It was good for clickbait. It was like good for their show. I'm not saying that they shouldn't have done that, but it wasn't going to change her mind, because emotionally and in the culture that she lives in, being Catholic and being pro-choice makes sense. You can be with me. You can be with Andrew. You can be with Brian, the host. You and I know that that is silliness, but that is a very normal worldly view in female circles. Watch any of these shows, any of these popular podcasts. They will talk about how they're religious or how they're spiritual, but they're very adamantly pro-abortion. This is a view I myself once held. Like, this is a very common view. It is common among conservatives too. Take the Tomi Lahren example, okay? So in all of this story that I'm telling you, I explained to Riley very calmly, this is again the girl that is Catholic and pro-choice, and I explained it to her through the emotional lens. And what I said to her was, there are general feelings and emotions that we have in society, specifically two. That abortion is like a normal thing. It's a good thing that we should have because we want to keep women, we want to allow women to have choice, and like the government shouldn't have a say over our bodies because we're conservative. Therefore, like, we're for a limited government. So that line of logic makes sense. And the second thing is that that black people are likely to get shot by police. And or unarmed black men are likely to get shot by police. And basically my line of argument there to her was, we feel like those things are true. But if you actually go and dig into the data about what abortion is, what abortion stands for, what the history of abortion is, and then similarly on terms of like the whole police thing, if you go and look at how many unarmed black men are shot at the Washington Post, like according to Washington Post data, it's not as many as the world and the media would like you to think. And when I got her thinking like, hey, I understand you feel that way, but the data actually doesn't align with that. So when I checked out the data, I felt those same things too, but I realized that I was wrong when I read the data. And I noticed, and she told me at the end, that her mind was changed. It wasn't changed from the rage baiting. It wasn't changed from being like, how the hell could you be Catholic and pro-choice? It wasn't changed by that. It was changed by someone, a woman, calmly sitting down with her and explaining to her irrationality in her logic, right? So that was a long-winded answer, but you wanted my honest answer, and that's what I gave you. And if you want to reach your emotional voter, point them to strong women who can speak their language, and perhaps stop taking dating advice or conversational advice from 35-year-old single men who live stream for a living and have man boobs, okay? That's just my advice to my male audience. I love you guys. Jonathan, thank you so much for your question. I hope that answered it. But now let's dive into the meat and bones of today's show. So here's what I've got on the docket for you today. We are going to unravel the trolling campaign between Kamala Harris and Tucker Carlson. Democrats are suing in Georgia to make sure ballots can't be recounted in the November election. And a court finally ruled on whether illegal immigrants have the right to bear arms in America. So without further ado, let's get into the 5 underreported stories that you need to know. Okay, first story. Kamala put out a letter that looks like a fake little kid saying that he's a conservative, but he wants to find common ground on gun violence with Democrats. And this was put out not by the Kamala campaign. It was put out by the official vice presidential X account. So I want to read this letter to you because it's so funny. This is from, like I said, the VP's account, and it says, Vice President Harris, one of my absolute favorite things in America, is how people of different backgrounds and beliefs have a freedom to communicate with each other. We are so blessed to live in a country where the greatest currency is the free-flowing exchange of ideas. In America, we are blessed with the ability to come together on common ground. And this is written for the listening audience in like chicken scrawl or like little kid handwriting where like they really uppercase their letters because they're learning their letter. Like it's so funny the way it was written. It goes on to say, in the spirit of establishing common ground, because every little kid talks like that, even though I am fairly conservative and we may have our disagreements, I am writing to express my gratitude for yours and President Biden's efforts to establish common sense gun safety laws. This is so funny. Like, who the fuck believes this? Who the fuck okayed this? This is so funny. Okay. It goes on to say, owning firearms is every American's constitutional right. Like all things, there needs to be, reasonable legislation, like age restriction, background checks, and mental health screenings. Thank you for heading the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention and for yours and President Biden's push for common sense gun safety laws. I look forward to seeing what the Biden-Harris administration accomplishes in this regard. All the best and God bless Tucker. So some people think this letter is a troll meant to mock Tucker Carlson because the signature on this letter looks really similar to Tucker Carlson's actual signature. And so Tucker actually, he seems to agree with this philosophy because he put out a letter trolling Kamala right back. Okay, so this is Tucker Carlson's response. It says, letter from a fan, that's the tweet from Tucker. And it's written in like little girl handwriting with the little heart eyes. It says, Dear Tucker, I can't believe I'm writing you this letter, but here goes. Honestly, I never thought we had all that much in common. Since college, I've considered myself moderately progressive in the sense that I don't believe in law enforcement, national borders, or the right of American citizens to exercise fundamental human autonomy. You seemed like you were coming from a totally different place. I thought I disagreed with you on everything. Boy, was I wrong. The other night I was looking on the internet and saw your conversation with Bobby Kennedy Jr. There wasn't a word I disagree with. Not one. I turned to Montel and said, I was very wrong about this man. So very wrong. The way he talks, he's so bold and wise and strong. He's immovable, like a towering oak tree in a windstorm. He sways gently, but never breaks. Guys, I'm sorry. It's so funny. His trunk is so broad and firm and rooted to the earth. I can't imagine the size of his root ball. I was so impressed. I'm dead. It goes on to say, so thank you. You've shown me something about myself and about the world. I will never forget it until we meet. OXOXO. Kamala with the crummy ass smiley face. Obviously, I think the original letter was fake. And I don't have any doubt that this was like some of a troll towards Tucker. Like I see it. But I take a step back because I find it, well, first off, I find it hilarious that the Democrats literally campaign on being this party of maturity, and then they put out fake stories trolling people. But I actually think this is more akin, it's less about trolling Tucker and more akin to Kamala's like weird freedom stories. So if you don't know what this is, when Kamala was a little kid, she allegedly was sitting in her stroller at a civil rights protest chanting freedom. And like liberals do this all the time. They have this weird ass phenomenon where they claim little kids come up to them and say profound things about politics. I know I can see right through it. It's so clearly fake. But what I actually want to bring up, the reason I actually brought up this whole story is because I have to get a little conspiratorial with y'all, but After this story went out, this letter or whatever, within 24 hours of that post, again, put on the vice president's page, not her campaign page, within 24 hours of this, the Department of Health and Human Services put out a Surgeon General notice about the mental health of kids and families because of gun violence in America. And a big chunk of the report blames guns for people's declining mental health. Okay, interesting. I think maybe we talk about the crappy food in our country, maybe the rampant use of social media, the pressure to have it all. Maybe we talk about those things before we blame a fundamental American right to bear arms, possibly. So where my logical line of thinking was like, it's very logical that this dumb ass letter about the same topic was posted as part of a coordinated effort to blame guns for the mental health decline in America. And I just want you guys to keep your eye out for it, because I feel like this is going to become the new talking point of the left. To help get rid of mental health problems, we have to get rid of gun violence through gun control. Just watch. When I'm right, you just let me know, okay? And the Democrats, they're not just pushing new talking points before this insane election, they're pushing for a new lawsuit as well. Yes, Democrats are suing in Georgia to block a new GOP-backed election certification rule. They're basically suing to stop people from double-checking ballot counts before elections are certified. Reading from the Federalist, there's like a hair flying around my studio. Okay, so this article does a really great job of breaking it down, so I'm going to try and make this as easy to understand as possible. So the Georgia State Election Board, so this is a board that is tasked with doing all things election, okay? They recently passed a rule that county election boards, so each board on each county in Georgia, can fulfill their certification responsibility, so they can certify an election, after reasonable inquiry, okay? So this is an amendment that allows people to, how do I put it? It's an amendment that allows people to go, okay, I'm not 100% sure whether the ballot counting and ballot tabulation in this area were accurate. I'd like to call for a recount. And it allows the election boards to do that. It says the SEB, which is, again, the state election boards, approved another amendment which requires permitted, this was a typo, which requires permitted board members to review all election-related documentation created during the conduct of election prior to the certification results. So it allows specific board members to just review and make sure that the election was done properly before certifying it. Basically, it's just a double check, okay? Like I said at the top, it's just a double check. But a lawsuit lodged by the DNC is arguing that this basic provisions over the election are discriminatory and they are problematic. Essentially, I mean, this is what the actual case reads. Courts across the country have expressly acknowledged that giving election officials the discretion to refuse certification would threaten to disenfranchise voter and create opportunities for election fraud on the part of all those officials. The DNC suit alleges the rules would also delay the election results and the certification of the election. Okay, I'm going to give you the facts from each side now, okay? Republicans, they want the election board to receive all the ballots, and if a board member, a permitted board member, has a reasonable inquiry to believe that something went awry in the ballot counting process, they can delay certifying the election, not inevitably, just until a recount happens or maybe just the hiccup that they saw is rectified, okay? So it's not stopping certification, it's just delaying it until hiccups that are identifiable and reasonable are rectified. Now I want to take this from the Democrat side. They want to ensure that Republicans, or honestly on this I'm going to have to say anyone in power, isn't forcing recounts for partisan reasons and delaying the results of the election. Now, I know what you're going to say because I'm thinking it too. Democrats have had no problem delaying elections to get mail-in votes, so why the hell are they all of a sudden taking issue with delaying elections to make sure the ballot counts are accurate? Like, come on, let's not be hypocrites here. But I'm going to let you make up your own mind on this lawsuit. But I'm telling you guys, we need to be cautious here. Democrats are smart about suing before elections, like what we just ran through, right? Republicans, I'm not a Republican, so I can say this. They talk a big ass game about ensuring election integrity, and they don't take action until after the election happens. If you're a Republican, and I know I have a lot of Republican viewers, you can't really do anything. You can't take action after the election. You need to do it before. So you should really advocate on behalf of, well, you should advocate to your local government officials to take action preemptively. That is how you will have and ensure real and accurate vote tabulations. But if you want to take action that helps this here podcast, please consider purchasing from my Based apparel collection. This show is independent. It's free, and it's kept that way by people like you who support my merch line. We have 2 hats out now. So we launched first with the Based hat. Super cute. You've seen me in it a bunch of times. If you don't know what Based is the opposite of woke, okay? And then this week, we just introduced our new line of conspiracy theorist hats. These are for the free thinkers. They come in black and white. The Based hat also comes in black and white. They're adorable, and they really help this channel out. So check out the link below or head over to basedinlogicapparel.com to get your hat. Be sure to tag me on Instagram when you get yours. Okay, let's move on to our next story. We've got some Democrat hypocrisy. Yes, the Biden-Harris official who is behind the green airplane push just revealed that he owns an oil well. Yeah, this man is forcing all of us to buy into the green agenda while he profits off of oil wells. What a hypocrite. What a freaking hypocrite. This is an article from the Washington Free Beacon, just doing a quick little dive through. This isn't a crazy long story, but it says the Federal Aviation Administration administrator, a lot of AAAs, but it's the FAA's administrator. His name is Michael Whitaker, and he is in charge of the Biden-Harris administration's goal of transitioning planes into being green planes, not oil reliant. But the problem here is that he owns an oil well in Wyoming, which he leases to Hillcorp Energy, the largest privately held oil company in the United States. This is according to a financial disclosure that was just made public, this month. Oh my gosh, I always eat before this show, and then sometimes I get a little out of breath. That's so lazy of me, but it's true. Okay, anyway, the article goes on to say, according to Whitaker's financial disclosure filed with the Federal Office of Government Ethics, it was made public this month that this guy's oil well is located in Wyoming and is worth up to $100,000. He only reports an annual income of $5,000 in royalties from the energy firm that he rents it out to, which is small, relatively speaking, because his total assets are worth millions of dollars, and this is about $5,000 a year. But what it does showcase is that the top Biden administration official who is pushing this climate agenda isn't fully bought into the climate agenda. It says, since taking office in 2021, the administration, including the FAA, has pursued policies to transition the nation from fossil fuels to green energy. I'm not going to ruminate on this story for too long because I think it's pretty plain and simple. It's just hypocrisy. So let's just move. That was quick. Let's just move on to our next story. So a pregnant woman who is 28 weeks along called 2 different abortion clinics in Colorado, and both clinics approved her for a late-term abortion with no medical or health reason required. She just needed $10,000 for an abortion when her child is more than viable outside of the womb. So I want to pull up a Twitter thread detailing this out. It went super viral, 5.3 million views. But before we do that, I do want to preface this by saying I'm a journalist. That's what my profession is. And right now I've got to admit to my audience, I have no way of proving that this person 100% called these clinics. But I did my best, my gut check, reviewing this person's timeline. This is an individual who's a former atheist, a former feminist who became a Christian and is wildly in favor of traditional values. So I'm just going to put some stock into her experience, explain it to you, and if you come away saying, oh, I'm not convinced, I totally understand. So this reads, from the feminist turned housewife on X, I'm 28 weeks pregnant. Out of curiosity, and for the sake of not just assuming this is possible in America, I called 2 different random clinics in Colorado about late-term abortion. Both said I could come in and get the procedure done. There wasn't a limit on gestational age. Both said I didn't need any medical or health reason, simply a personal decision. $10,000 and I could go unalive my baby, who at this stage is more than viable outside the womb, simply because I wanted to. She says, this is evil. And she goes on to say, she cites The Guardian, where The Guardian claims that abortion is legal with no limit in Colorado, and there are 1.4 million women of reproductive age in the state. She commented on this and said, and for the pro-aborts who are mad, why? Isn't it a woman's choice? Why does it upset you that this is legal and possible? If you're pro-choice and mad at this, then maybe it's time to reevaluate your position on abortion. Every time we talk about abortion, I do like to remind people that the majority of Americans do not believe that this is an acceptable timeline, these unfettered abortions. The majority of people in America believe in a 10 to 15 week limit, and that is not what Democrats advocate for. They are not reasonable on this issue, okay? I keep hearing this line from like the top brass of Democrats party or Democratic officials or whatever. They say they don't want abortion up until birth. And then if you go and look out there, there isn't a single fucking law out there where Democrats have put together that says they should stop abortions on demand from happening at any point. They're just liars. They're just liars. It's patently absurd. And I think this story only showcases that further. But let's move on to our final story, okay? This one I think will draw some ire because it's crazy. But a 3-judge panel ruled that illegal immigrants do not have the right to keep and bear arms in the United States. Yes, that means there are judges out there who initially ruled that people who break our laws are allowed to keep and bear arms in this country. Like, these are the people who want to take away your guns, but they're totally cool with an illegal immigrant having one. Fucking crazy. So I went and did research on this, and usually I'd pull up an article, but like, no article did a good job of explaining this. I linked the Breitbart one below, but in all honesty, it required like way too much background knowledge to actually read it to like normal people. Even I was a little lost, and I do this literally all day, every day. So anyway, I just wrote my own little rundown that I'm going to read to you. It says, this all started back in 2022 when an illegal immigrant was charged with possession of a firearm. So the immigrant, or the illegal immigrant's lawyer, claimed that the Constitution allows the people to keep and bear arms, not just citizens, which is quite the line of thinking. And then at the same time, or about 2 years earlier, an Obama-appointed judge had ruled that there was an illegal immigrant who, quote, hadn't broken laws at the time he was caught with a gun, which is quite the take, given that he was illegally in the country, so that's a law that he's broken. But the Obama-appointed judge argued that this individual, this illegal immigrant, deserved to have a gun in 2020 because of the race riots happening in Chicago. So let's unpack all of that. First off, she says that, like I said, illegal immigrant hadn't broken law, had broke law. Okay, cool. Then he deserves to have a gun. He deserves to have access to a firearm because of the race riots in 2020. Maybe if you shut down the race riots in 2020, the illegal immigrants wouldn't feel so fucking unsafe in our country that they would need a firearm. What the hell? And so finally, in the Lord's year 2024, the Fifth Circuit of Appeals decided and confirmed what we all knew to be true, that no, illegal immigrants cannot own firearms. So sanity has returned. Freaking insane. Oh my gosh. Okay, well, I guess since we're talking about lawsuits, I saw in the Story Seekers channel that people are wanting me to address the new Trump indictment. So let's get to that. But before we do that, do you know how horrible your tap water is, or even your Brita filter water is? Water quality is going down the drain in America, and if you want to ensure that you're getting the highest quality water while also supporting your values, look no further than Freedom 2.0. It's like H2O, but with the freedom, yeah? Freedom 2.0 is an American-first company dedicated to bringing you high-quality reverse osmosis water, and the best part is you can just set up a subscription so you never go thirsty. It's awesome. Couldn't recommend it more. This also helps our show. You can click the link in my bio to get your agua. All right. So here's what's going on with the Trump indictment. All right. To bring you up to speed, if you're like, Chrissy, I have no idea what's going on, let me bring you up to speed as best I can. So the Department of Justice, under the name of a man named, or under the auspices of a man named Jack Smith. Jack Smith and the Department of Justice filed an indictment against Donald Trump, legal filing against Donald Trump, alleging that he illegally interfered in the 2020 election. Trump pushed back through his legal team and said, nah, I have presidential immunity, which means because I am president, I have immunity or the ability to kind of do more than the average citizen. And so when Trump pushed back about this, this ended up going to the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court had to rule on whether Trump has immunity in specific acts. And the court ruled that Trump does have immunity, but only over actions that are considered official acts. So official presidential acts, acts that otherwise, if he were an average citizen, he could not do. So that ruling came out, and then the Justice Department under Jack Smith had 60 days to refile charges. So they had initially filed the indictment. Trump fought back, went up to the Supreme Court rules, and now Jack Smith had 60 days to refile those charges. And with just 3 days left, the Department of Justice and Jack Smith refiled those charges. So cool. You're up to speed, okay? Like, what was that? Maybe 30, 40 seconds, right? You're up to speed. But story seekers Dave and Raymond chatted and asked about the updated indictment. So what's in the indictment now that's different than it was before? I'm going to take you through a couple of key takeaways. And the first one being that these are slimmed down significantly. Not crazy significantly, but 9 pages significantly. So that's, 45 to 36 pages. That's nothing to complain about, right? So the new documents were slimmed down significantly, and the language was reworked. So what the language here does is it specifies that the charges that the Department of Justice are filing against Trump are as Trump the private citizen, Trump the presidential candidate, not Trump the president. So it says, it argues Trump acted as a private citizen and not as president when he undertook the alleged scheme to sway the election, the 2020 election, right? There's also somebody else who got their name dropped from the suit. It says the fresh indictment also drops the claim that Trump tried to pressure DOJ officials to work to overturn his defeat. So there was an initial claim that said Trump was pressuring the Justice Department to do illegal things. And the high court, since they ruled that Trump has presidential action, this would have been a presidential action. And so the Justice Department dropped this and moved on. We also uncovered and we heard, because of the refiling, that there's going to be a brand new grand jury that's going to oversee this. That is new information as well. And then the final point that I think even the BBC, the article that we're reading, even they realize is that this is going to be a very uphill battle. It says the new indictment leaves in place several key allegations against Trump, including that he attempted to persuade then VP Mike Pence to obstruct the election certification. This is despite the fact that conversations between Trump and Pence would probably fall under the category of official acts for which Trump has immunity from prosecution, because a conversation between the president and the vice president about the certification of an election as the current sitting president is probably not illegal. It's covered under immunity. So in short, it's just a more refined version. But Jack Smith, I feel like Jack Smith is now on the defense as opposed to on the offense when it comes to this. I also think, you're not going to see any of this happen until after the election. So it's not pressing. It's still interesting, but it's not a pressing matter. It could all go away if Trump is winning this election or wins the election in November. And speaking of election, there's another underreported story worth covering and chatting about pretty quickly. So Democrats are trying to keep RFK, who already dropped out from the presidential race, on the ballot in swing states. There are Democrats in Michigan, there are Democrats in Wisconsin who are fighting to keep RFK on the ballot, specifically to draw votes away from Trump after RFK endorsed him over Kamala. So Democrats think that they can just keep RFK on the ballot and people will vote for him anyway, and that will take votes away from Trump. But this is the party of democracy, right? Well, they're fucking clowns, you guys. They're fucking clowns. Not only did they didn't just disenfranchise their voter base by putting Kamala in this little switcheroo, they're manipulating now swing state elections to their advantage. Part of me is I don't know if I'm respect, that's genius, or if I'm that's downright awful, you fucking assholes. But Ben Shapiro responded to this by saying, in response, Republicans should move to keep Joe Biden's name on the ballot as well in as many swing states as possible. Would you let me know in the comments if you agree? And speaking of RFK, I was thinking today, I want to end today's episode on a happier note. Most of you guys are going to listen to this Thursday night, Friday morning, Saturday. So I want this to be uplifting as you're headed into your weekend, right? So I teased RFK, but he was on Tucker Carlson show, and there's this, I would call it an underreported section of that interview that I just found to be incredibly wholesome. I was just obsessed with listening to it. So RFK was talking about why he got into environmentalism, and I just think it's so beautiful. Let's roll the clip.
I got into the environment because I wanted, this connection to the fishes and the birds and the wildlife and the whales and the Purple Mountain's majesty, and that, I understood that the way, God talks to human beings through many vectors, through each other, through organized religion, through the great prophets, through the wise people, the great books of those religions, but nowhere with the kind of detail and texture and grace and joy as through creation. And when we destroy nature, we diminish our capacity to sense the divine.
Come on, you can't tell me that wasn't touching. And it made me think a little bit more critically than just there's clearly this movement going on in the conservative movement that's pushing back against Big Pharma, and it's represented in part by RFK. And we're pushing back against Big Pharma, we're pushing back against screen time, we're pushing back against couch rotting, whatever. And I think there are some more traditional neocon conservatives skeptical of a populist movement like this. But I just want to remind you that even when the movement is about the environment or healthy eating, at the end of the day, those maybe more populist ideas are about bringing life back to how God intended us to live. And I just can't think of anything more conservative than that. That was so mushy for me. So mushy squishy for me, but that's okay. I do have one final segment before I sign off for the day, or for the weekend, I should say. This is a fan favorite, truly.
Is it real or is it satire?
You cannot be serious!
Kamala Harris wants to build a border wall. Could that possibly be real, or is that absolutely satire? Well, it's real, baby. I don't believe it's real because she hasn't had a single policy issue that she's solidified in writing. But apparently, Kamala Harris actually wants to close the border? The Washington Free Beacon, love them so much. They put out this hilarious montage. It's all credit to them. I did not put this together. It's all the Free Beacon. Let's roll it.
And the idea that we would have a president of the United States that vilifies immigrants, that wants to build what I call his vanity project, a multi-billion-dollar wall, which, by the way, will never get built. You cannot hold the American people hostage over your vanity project.
On the subject of transnational gangs, let's be perfectly clear.
The president's medieval vanity project is not going to stop them. The president at this point is holding the American people hostage over his vanity project. It's absolutely the height of irresponsibility that this administration is holding them and the American public hostage over the president's vanity project. Because I was a prosecutor for many years, including the Attorney General of California. I specialize on transnational criminal organizations. Yeah. That wall ain't gonna stop them. We don't need a multi-billion-dollar wall. That wall ain't gonna stop them. Let me be very clear. I'm not gonna vote for a wall under any circumstances.
Harris said that she supports the bipartisan border bill, which includes requiring the Trump border wall.
That's so funny. Like, how is that not satire? I don't know. All right. That's all from me this week on the podcast front. If you made it to the end, will you drop the letter emoji to harken back to our conversation about Tucker and Kamala's fake letter exchange? Be sure to check out the YouTube and Rumble channels tomorrow and Monday for new video drops, and I'll see you back on the podcast Tuesday. Bye, friends. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked what you heard, please be sure to give this video a thumbs up and leave a comment about how beautiful, stunning, and funny I am. And if you want more content based in logic, be sure to click over here for more videos and clips of my show. If you have the means to financially support the show, consider purchasing from my merch line, Based Apparel, linked right below. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you back here next time. Bye, friends.